Good day, everyone, and welcome to a lecture I'm giving on Lacanian psychoanalysis. It's called Emergence, an introduction to psychoanalysis. I invite you to join me on a journey into the depths of human psyche, guided by the revolutionary ideas of Jacques Lacan. Lacan, a French psychoanalyst, revolutionized our understanding of identity and self-perception through concepts like the mirror stage. This stage, an infant's recognition of their reflection, sparks a profound realization, the awareness of the I. But this recognition is a double-edged sword, as it also marks the child's entry into a world of language and societal norms, forever shaping their sense of self. Through this lens, we can begin to understand how our identities are not just personal, but intricately interwoven with the fabric of society itself. In our series, we explore these themes, revealing the complex dance between who we are and how we are. I invite you to journey with me into this intricate and mysterious dimension of the human psyche, illuminating as it is and illuminated by the groundbreaking work of Jacques Lacan. Known as a maverick of psychoanalysis, Lacan reshaped our understanding of identity, desire, and the unconscious. Central to his thought is the concept of the mirror stage, a transformative moment when an infant gazes into a mirror and first recognizes their reflection. It's a powerful realization, the awareness of the I, but this newfound identity is not as solid as it seems. The image in the mirror is complete, whole, and coherent, yet the infant's actual experience of their body is fragmented and uncoordinated. This gap creates a yearning for the completeness seen in the reflection, a yearning that becomes a driving force in our lives. It is here, in this moment, that we begin to internalize how others see us and how we see ourselves. Lacan's mirror stage reveals that identity is not just something we possess, but something we constantly construct, refine, and negotiate through language, relationships, and the stories we tell ourselves. Now, let's move deeper. Lacan challenges us to think of ourselves not as solitary beings, not as subjects shaped by language and the symbolic systems of the world around us. He believed that our unconscious is structured like a language. Imagine this. Our desires, our fears, and even our dreams are all encoded, waiting to be deciphered. Lacan's work invites us to pay attention to the gaps, the slips, the pauses in language. What is left unsaid often speaks the loudest. This idea is not just abstract, it resonates with how we live our lives, how we create meaning, and even how we navigate relationships. Think about how often we find ourselves searching for something we can't quite literally name, chasing after an elusive sense of fulfillment. Lacan would call this the object petit a, or the object cause of desire. It represents how we believe it'll make us whole, but always remains just outside of reach. This concept challenges us to rethink satisfaction, not as something we achieve, but as something that drives our creativity, our ambitions, and yes, even our struggles. In this series, we explore the ways these Lacanian ideas surface in our everyday lives. What happens when we confront the mirror, not just literally, but metaphorically? How do we reconcile the person we think we are with the person we perform for others? These questions aren't just philosophical. They're human, and they're at the heart of what makes us who we are. So, as we delve deeper into Lacan's ideas, it's important to remember that his work is not meant to provide easy answers, but rather to provoke thought and self-reflection. One of his central contributions is his exploration of the symbolic, the imaginary, and the real, three registers that shape our experiences. The symbolic is the world of language, culture, and societal norms. It's the framework through which we make sense of our lives, yet it is also the domain that imposes limits upon us. The imaginary, on the other hand, is the realm of images, illusions, and the stories we create about ourselves. It's where we construct the narratives of who we think we are or who we wish us to be. And then there's the real, the raw, the unfiltered reality that resists being fully captured by words or images. The real is what disrupts our neatly constructed identities and reminds us of the gaps, the missing pieces that we often try to ignore. These three registers aren't just theoretical. They play out in our daily lives in profound ways. For example, think about how we communicate. Language, as part of the symbolic, allows us to express ourselves, but it also shapes and sometimes limits what we can say. We often find ourselves saying, "I can't quite put that into words," because the real, those raw emotions or experiences, refuses to be neatly packaged. And the imaginary? That's the story we tell ourselves about what we think others are hearing when we speak, or how we imagine they see us. Lacan challenges us to consider how much of our self-perception is rooted in these stories, and how often do they diverge from reality. Now, let's bring this closer to home. In the work we're doing here, be it through this series, or through creative projects, or through our personal lives, aren't we always navigating these three registers? When we create something, we draw from the symbolic, the words, the ideas, the cultural references that give our work meaning. Yet, the imaginary is there too, the vision of what we hope to achieve, the image we want to project. And no matter how polished or complete our creation seems, the real, the unspoken, the unresolved, the parts that defy explanation but give our life work its soul, that also is there. Lacan's ideas also compel us to think about desire. He famously said that desire is the desire of the other. Think about that. What does that mean? Desire is the desire of the other. Well, according to Lacan, it means that our desires are shaped, not in isolation, but always in relation to others. I can't stress how important this facet of Lacanian's work is. We desire to be seen, to be understood, to be recognized, but this recognition is never complete. It's always mediated by language, by symbols, by the gaze of the other. And so our desires remain elusive, driving us forward, but never fully satisfied. Think of the object petit a, that mysterious object cause of desire, as the thread that weaves through our lives. It's not the object we think we want, it's what gives our desires their energy and vitality. It's the spark that pushes us to create, to connect, to explore. And it's what keeps us coming back to the mirror asking, who am I? What could I be? What do I want to become? And so what's interesting about this series, the series that I began several months ago, is I really did not have an idea of what I was going to do. And I knew that there were things that had to be said. I knew that there were ideas that were just waiting to be expressed. And this has been a wonderful journey. And since I'm involved very deeply in psychology and psychoanalytic theory, I thought it was very worthwhile to approach it symbolically and through the imagination. By coming up with a surreal and unusual approach, I would let my unconscious come up with particular details on how the shows would go. And so, using the mirror as a metaphor, who are we? What identity do we see when we look in the mirror? Who do I want to become? Who do I want to become for myself or the other? How does the other see us? Can we fulfill our desires? Can we fulfill the other's desires? I think these are important questions. And so, as we reflect on Lacanian's insights on the mirror stage, the symbolic, the real, we must also consider how these forces shape artistic creation itself. In Lacanian psychoanalysis, art is not merely an aesthetic endeavor, but it's an act of sublimation, a process through which the subject channels unconscious drives into forms that are socially recognized, yet never fully contained. My work in surreal, avant-garde television is precisely this, an attempt to stage desire, to confront the fractures of identity, and to navigate neurosis and psychosis through visual and symbolic experimentation. Each show, each fragmented sequence, each unsettling juxtaposition is an engagement with the impossible, the attempt to give form to what resists representation. If desire is always structured by absence, then perhaps the creative act is our most radical negotiation with the void. In this way, sublimation is not escape, but confrontation, a way of working through, transforming, and illuminating that which otherwise haunts us in silence. Through the interplay of performance, imagery, and thought, the art itself becomes a kind of psychoanalytic session, an encounter with what lies beyond articulation, beckoning the viewer to see not just with their eyes, but with their unconscious. And so let us continue with our introduction to Lacanian psychoanalysis, and I'd like to build on a few of the ideas already mentioned. We explored the mirror stage, the formation of identity, and the symbolic structures that shape our subjectivity. Now I'd like to move deeper into the terrain of desire, identity, and the unconscious. Let's begin with a crucial Lacanian insight. Desire is the desire of the other. I mentioned the importance of this earlier on, and I'll continue in this vein. This phrase, desire is the desire of the other, encapsulates one of Lacan's most radical formulations. Desire is never purely individual. It is mediated by the other, specifically by language, by social structures, by the gaze that defines us before we even begin to speak. Desire is a never-ending pursuit. When we often think of desire, we often think of it as something straightforward, wanting an object, chasing after something. But in Lacanian thought, desire is not simply about obtaining what we lack. It's about sustaining lack itself. When we speak, we do so in an attempt to fill something missing. When we love, we seek a recognition that can never be fully granted. When we search for meaning, we do so within structures that always defer completion. Always, desire remains unfulfilled, insatiable, precisely because it is not about objects. It's about the structure of longing itself. Let's consider the role of fantasy. According to Lacan, fantasy serves to sustain desire, providing a narrative that allows us to continue chasing an elusive object without ever fully obtaining it. We do not actually want the object itself. We want the chase. We want the pursuit, the possibility, a fulfillment that never quite arrives. And so, identity is the identity of a fragmented subject, us being the subject. Now let's return to this idea of identity. We often assume that we possess a stable sense of self, a unified consciousness that remains consistent over time. But psychoanalysis tells us otherwise. Lacan presents the subject, you and I, as barred, divided between conscious and unconscious forces, shaped by language, desire, and fantasy. In this way, our identities are never whole. We adopt masks, roles, and symbolic positions that give us a temporary sense of stability. But beneath these performances, our subjectivity remains fractured. This aligns quite well with Dick Schwartz, who wrote the book No Bad Parts, a book that I definitely recommend. This aligns with Dick Schwartz's ideas about internal family systems, the idea that we are composed of multiple parts, different aspects of the self that emerge in response to different situations. Lacan's notion of the barred subject suggests that these diversions are inherent, not something we must overcome, but something we must recognize. Which brings me next to the gaze and the scopic drive. The gaze, which obviously represents something visual, the gaze plays a crucial role in this psychoanalytic framework. What does it mean to be seen? How does being looked at shape our sense of self. From the moment we enter into language, we are positioned within the gaze of the other. We see ourselves through the other's perspective, through social expectations, through parental recognition, through the images reflected back to us. In the realm of art and media, particularly surrealist and avant-garde expression, we can explore the distortions of the gaze, how looking reshapes reality, and how the visual field itself structures meaning. And now, some final thoughts and looking ahead. Jacques Lacan gives us the tools to interrogate who we are and what we desire and why we pursue what we cannot attain. As we close today's lecture, consider this. Your subjectivity, your sense of self, is always in motion. Your identity is never singular. Your desire remains structured by something beyond you. Next time, we'll go deeper into this concept of jouissance, this pleasure beyond pleasure, the excess of that complicates desire itself. So let's continue now and let's review what we've covered so far. We've discussed the gaze, the mirror stage, and the structure of desire. Let's continue with the foundation, the very moment in which subjectivity takes form and desire takes root. To understand psychoanalysis, particularly through Lacan, we must first recognize the fundamental misrecognition that constitutes our identity. The mirror stage is considered the birth of the ego. Lacan tells us between 6 and 18 months, the infant encounters their reflection. And this reflection, of course, is in a mirror. And in that moment, they experience a kind of revelation. That is me. But this recognition is built on an illusion. Why is this? Because the infant's internal reality, fragmented, uncoordinated, dependent, does not match the coherent image they see in the mirror. They assume this image is their true self, but the self they experience from within remains incomplete. This moment of misrecognition is what forms the ego, a self-image that is whole in experience, but always lacking in lived experience. The ego becomes the foundation upon which we build meaning. It allows us to navigate the world, but at its core, it is false, an imagined wholeness that masks an underlying fragmentation. The gaze, a lost object that structures desire. Once the subject begins to function within this imagined coherence, they enter the symbolic order, language, culture, society. But here, desire begins to form precisely because something fundamental has already been lost, the gaze. But what is the gaze? It's not just seeing. It is the object of desire, the object that can never be truly apprehended. The gaze is never possessed because the moment it is directly encountered, it vanishes. The subject, believing they can reclaim what was lost, continually pursues objects that seem to promise satisfaction, but always finds that it is not it. Meaning itself is built on this lack, because if the subject could directly apprehend the gaze, desire would cease to exist. We see this everywhere, people. We see it everywhere in life. We see people chasing recognition, attempting to capture an ideal, believing that if they achieve a certain status, relationship, or image, they will finally be complete, but the gaze is never fully obtained. Fantasy, the way we organize the impossible. Since the gaze cannot be captured, fantasy becomes the structure that gives desire a shape. Fantasy does not resolve itself by itself, but instead it resolves itself through the subject's fundamental lack. Instead of it resolving itself there, it offers a way to temporarily stabilize it. It provides a narrative that allows the subject to keep moving, to remain in pursuit of something rather than confront the impossibility of fulfillment. Now, this is where emergence itself takes its form, where I play with fantasy as a way of exploring the gaze, the ego, and the fragmented self. The gaze in performance. My work on the show directly interacts with the logic of the gaze, not as something to be seen, but as something that organizes desire through its absence. The blindfolded silence, the close-ups of my head, the dancing, the dice and scaffolding from above. These are all ways of disrupting the expected field of vision. Rather than giving the audience a stable subject, I create ruptures, forcing the viewer into relationship with something missing. My performance denies identification. There is no whole figure to grasp, only fragments. The gaze I'm exploring here, where is it located? Is it the gaze of the other, the primal gaze of the mother, or is it the gaze of my own reflection, the mirror stage recognition that was already faulty? The question lies at the heart of Lacanian psychoanalysis, because the subject never fully escapes either. The mother's gaze establishes the structure of absence, while the mirror stage installs a deceptive wholeness. Desire is born between these 2 points, an endless movement between the pursuit of recognition and the confrontation with this loss. We do not answer these questions definitively. We enact them. We place it in movement, as the gaze itself is never fully static. It shifts, it disappears, it structures, and it haunts. And so in concluding today's episode, Introduction to Lacanian Analysis, I would like to reiterate the fact that Lacan teaches us that we are always chasing something we cannot possess. We are structured around a fundamental lack, and our pursuits of objects, identities, and meaning is an attempt to stabilize this lack. And so we continue, always seeking, never capturing, always organizing our absence into the fantasy of presence. This is emergence. This is psychoanalysis. And this is where inquiry begins.